Um, the story goes back to Sabbatai Zev, a self-described messiah of the Jews who lived in Turkey about 300 and some years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he said he was the messiah, and that it was the job of the Jews themselves to carry out the prophecies of the Torah, and that we shouldn't wait for God to do it. And the Sultan of Turkey had him called up and said, if you really are the Messiah, then do some miracles, and if you can't, either you to convert to Islam or we'll execute you. And so he couldn't perform the miracles, so they pretended to convert to Islam, and instead they worked on subverting the Turkish government from within, and that was the Young Turks eventually. But the Rothschild family—
Did that become the Ottoman Empire, or is that something different?
That was what undid the Ottoman Empire.
Gotcha.
That became Ataturk. Ataturk was one of their members. Okay. The founder of modern Turkey.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of pages and documents and stuff to back up what I'm saying. I'm not just talking out of the side of my mouth here.
Right.
But the point is that the Rothschilds liked this idea, and so you had this group, this about 1 million member sect that believes the prophecies are inevitable, they can't be stopped, and they're actively working to carry them out. This is the really mind-boggling part of it, because it's just, it's just too big and too ridiculous for most people to comprehend, but the evidence is overwhelming. And the point is that these prophecies call for, at the end of they call for a huge battle between two great nations, Gog and Magog, Armageddon.
Right.
And that 90% of humanity would be killed in this battle, and then the remaining 10% would be enslaved by the Jews, who would each have 2,800 slaves. You remember, I've got Jewish ancestry on both sides, so this is not mainstream Jewish thinking. This is this particular sect, okay?
Right. Which would be Sabbatean Jews?
Yeah, Sabbateans, I call them.
Okay.
I don't even call them Jews, because their belief system isn't really Jewish.
Right.
You had Israeli newspapers, okay, and they tried to set up this war between the Soviet Union and the West, which would have done that, and they almost succeeded during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I happened to be living in Cuba at the time, by the way. I was just a baby.
Wow.
But what happened then, and this is where we get into, hard financial history, international financial treaties, stuff that is very well documented in the archives. But basically, a lot of the nations of the world said this is crazy, and they wanted something different. I'm going to take you back a bit to so people can understand what's happening now and what specific legal actions we're taking against this group of fanatics.
Please do, yeah. I've read the entire 111-page document thoroughly, as if it was a contract I would be signing myself. So when we get to that, I'll be happy to dialogue with you. But go ahead, yeah, do it.
I've been shown many documents related to this that nothing to do with that lawsuit. But essentially, in the 1930s, the Japanese invaded China, and their goal was to take the gold, confiscate the Chinese gold. And
were they still was Japan at that time trying to create what they called the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere?
Yes, but Japan was also still linked to the British. It's complex. But essentially, there was conflicting groups with conflicting goals. You got to remember that it's not a monolithic story. There's different actors with different agendas.
Well, Japan was medieval up until 1877 when Captain Morgan, stormed the Japanese shore with gunboats and basically said Westernize or die. And then Japan went into an extremely rapid, almost unprecedented industrial growth after that.
Well, it was it wasn't a Captain Morgan, but anyway, the Rothschilds built up Japan as a military colony to use to dominate China.
Okay, beginning in the 1800s,
going right back. I mean,
so as soon as they Westernized, right? Okay. So the Meiji families, that was the Meiji Restoration where that all started. The Meijis were apparently kids, right? It was like a youth rebellion. Are you saying that the Rothschilds financed these youths and put them in power?
They took over the southern clans of Satsuma and Choshu and then gave them modern weapons and used them to conquer Japan.
Okay.
Anyway,
right, Japan was feudal.
Sidetrack. That's an interesting thing, but let's get to what's happening today.
Okay, great.
And we need to go back to the 1930s. The point was that Japan was invading China, and they had these bandits run by a guy called Kodama Yoshio. They go into a town and they'd seize the gold and loot the treasure. And then the Japanese army would show up and say, "Oh, we hear you've got bandit problems. We'll protect you." And by that time, the gold was all being shipped off to Tokyo, and then later to the Philippines.
Very clever.
And the Kuomintang government didn't want their gold to be taken by the Japanese. And in 1938, 7 U.S. warships filled with Chinese gold and silver, and a lot of the gold was sent out before, too, going back to the 1920s, was sent to the United States. And the Chinese were given 60-year bonds. Let's just stick to the 1938 ones. They were given 60-year bonds in exchange for the gold they handed over to the Federal Reserve Board. Now,
I just want to thread this. Are you saying that the Rothschilds, to some degree, were still behind these criminal actions of stealing the gold?
There's the American families behind the U.S. Federal Reserve Board who were trying to grab gold, and the Rothschilds who were trying to grab gold. It was a gold grab with different people trying to grab gold for themselves and their groups, okay?
So Japan, in some sense, was acting as a proxy for them?
Yes.
Okay.
But the point is that a lot of gold was shipped to the United States, and the Chinese were given lots of U.S. government bonds with astronomical denominations in exchange for that gold.
Now, you mentioned that it was Kuomintang was the government.
That would be the nationalist Chinese government that was in power in China at the time.
Are those communists, or is this something else?
No, they weren't communists. They're the people who then fled to Taiwan after the communists took over.
Well, here's Taiwan, this little tiny country which has so much economic power. That's why China seems to always be trying to invade them and get it back. Are you saying that that's when this all started?
I mean, the Taiwanese took a lot of the treasure with them when they fled China, yeah?
Okay.
They have a museum, the museum in Taiwan, which is very famous. And there's some hills behind the museum. And every year, they change the display in the museum, okay? They've been doing that for 50 years, and they haven't even begun to make a dent in displaying all the treasures they have hidden in those hills.
My goodness. You're saying these are subterranean vaults inside the hills?
This is the ancient imperial treasure of China, okay?
Wow.
But that's just one of the many treasure hoards that are out there.
Where did China get all this gold?
What?
Are you saying that was this like from the Mongolians? Where did all the treasure come from in the first place? Did they conquer people and get it that way, or what?
Okay, well, for example, if you look at the old archives and history books, you'll see the Romans were buying silk and ceramics and spices from the Chinese and paying for it in gold.
Oh, my God.
And so were the Spaniards. When they took all the gold they stole from the Aztecs and the Incas, and they spent on Asian stuff. Okay?
Oh, my God.
So about 85% of the world's gold ended up in Asia over the past thousands of years.
I'm really getting it now. This is amazing. Okay. Go ahead.
And so part of what World War II was about was a grab for this gold, all right?
Wow.